Hi, I'm Bobby C. Welcome to my channel. If you recently have purchased a Sprinter-based RV, there are probably a few things you should know as you begin your journey of ownership. Today I really want to talk about 5 key things, 5 key tips that all newbies to Sprinter-based RVs should know. Stick around. Okay, tip number 1, batteries. If there's one truism with Mercedes Sprinter-based RVs, it's if you do not use your RV on a regular basis, your chassis battery will die. There is a parasitic drain on these vehicles that's, Lord only knows where it's coming from, but that's a guarantee. It will die. So how do you prevent that from happening? Let me show you a couple of ways. When you go to start your vehicle, you'll get the indications on your dash. If everything works well, you turn the key and it's all good. But what if that doesn't happen? What do you do? Well, let's show you a trick. If you go to start your Sprinter and it's dead, you get no response. Happened to me once when I was doing work inside the vehicle. I had the courtesy lights on. Didn't think about it. I had the doors open quite a while and I had the windows down. I go to start the vehicle and boom, nothing. So what do? I panicked because bad weather was coming. We're going to get rain and whatever. So one of the things that you can do if your Sprinter will not start is to utilize your house battery as an assist to start the Sprinter. How do you do that? Well, right below where you put in your ignition key and below the shifter, down here, hopefully you can see that there's a button. It's marked auxiliary start, and that's what that's for. So you turn the key and push the button at the same time, and it should hopefully start your Sprinter so that you can do whatever you need to do. If your auxiliary start button doesn't work, then hey, let's try to jump start it. Okay, so let's find the battery, and you won't find it here. The battery is actually located, it's not in the engine compartment, it's located basically in the front under the seating area. I'll show you that in a minute. But you can still jump start it because this gives you access to a positive terminal for jump starting, and this gives you access to a negative ground. So you can jump start it that way. I've done it before. It does work. The advantage of this, in a way, is I had a different RV that was a Ford, and the battery was actually right in front and right behind the grill. And I park my RV out in the driveway, and when you park an RV out in the driveway, it gets very cold. So my battery actually froze up. So I was kind of stuck with that until the temperatures warmed up a bit. So this way, your battery is inside. It's under, the front area, which keeps it somewhat insulated. So your battery, if you see where your center area is here, your battery is actually right underneath here. So to access it, you have to take some of these panels off of the floor to get to it, and it is accessible there. As you can see, you got a few screws to take out here, and this actually comes out as one piece, and there's another piece in the center. So it's doable. I did have to replace this battery one time, and it's a little challenge to get to it. One way that you can prevent your chassis battery from dying is to disconnect it. This is the disconnect for your chassis battery. To disconnect it, you're going to push down on this red tab and pull back, and that will completely disconnect your chassis battery and avoid getting it drained. So if you're not going to be using it for long periods of time, if you're going to put it in storage possibly, or even like me, I haven't really used it much this summer because I had some surgery which kept me down for a while, you probably want to disconnect it. That would be one way to keep it from dying. So make sure you are aware of where that is. Mine was a little tricky to pull off at first because I'm not that coordinated, and you have to push down the tab and pull at the same time, and it was really tight. But eventually I got it, so it will come off, and that's a good way to preserve your battery. There's another way that you can preserve your chassis battery from discharging. There are some devices that are sold. One that I've used before and many use is called a trickle start. So you can Google that and it'll give you all the details on it. Basically, the trickle start's a device that would go underneath your passenger seat. This removes pretty easily, and you can get inside of there and you can make a connection as outlined in the directions. So what the trickle start does is when you install it underneath your passenger seat as directed, it will use your house battery to maintain the charge on your chassis battery. And normally, you know, you would plug in your house battery to charge. So at the same time you were charging your house battery, you would also be helping keeping your chassis battery maintained. And the final way that I found, what I've got up here is basically a small solar powered solar panel that I bought from actually Harbor Freight, that I have that plugged in there, and it will, by solar power from that little panel, help maintain my chassis battery. Hasn't failed me yet, so we'll see how that goes, and I'll let you know. So what about your house batteries? We talked about the chassis battery. How about the house batteries? Well, the important thing is to keep them charged. The best way to do it is to plug in your RV to shore power whenever you can. But it's really important, because I did not know this initially, and sometimes I guess other people might not. That will not charge your house battery if your main power switch is off. So your main power switch does need to be on when you are charging it to shore power, or really you're not charging anything. So keep that in mind. That's important to keep your house battery charged. Okay, right next to my entry door is where my little compartment is for my house battery. And it is a pull out. So you can have different kinds of house batteries. The things to keep aware of with these are, if it is a maintenance battery, you do need to check your fluid levels in there, and if it needed, add some distilled water to those cells so they don't go dry. Of course, your terminals should be clean. I've cleaned these up a few times, and you want to test the condition of your battery periodically. So the other thing you can use to keep your house battery maintained is a really inexpensive meter like this. I got this one from Harbor Freight, and basically you can test your voltage just to make sure that it is maintaining a charge. So I just tested mine. You just put the red lead on the positive and the black lead on the negative. I have it on DC volts 20, and it told me that I had 12.3 or 12.4, so it's probably due for being charged, but that's close to fully charged. So good to have, and part of your battery maintenance. Tip number 2, generators. All right, let's talk about generators. So I have a propane generator. You can have propane or diesel. There are different things that should be done on a maintenance basis. You should check the oil. The cover removes. Check the oil, change the oil periodically as required. The most common maintenance that should be done with your generators is you should run them monthly under load, and that's important. So what does under load mean? Under load means there should be some electrical load when you're running the generator for 10-15 minutes at least a month. And for example, you could put on your air conditioner, that would put it under load. You could move your slides in and out, that could put it under load. You could put on 1 or 2 TVs. I have 2 TVs. I put both TVs on. That puts it under load. So something like that is what's going to be required to run your generator under load. If you just turn it on and run it and turn it off, it really doesn't do the job. So it has to be under load. Tip number 3, DEF. What is DEF? DEF. DEF stands for something. But basically it's a chemical additive that goes into diesel engines to reduce the amount of particulates that go into the air. So it stands for diesel exhaust fluid. So, but what is it? Where does it go? Well, you can buy it different places. You can buy it in an auto parts store. You can buy it at some truck stops. One tip I would give you is, if you do buy it wherever, there is a shelf life on it, so make sure you check an expiration date, because that's very, very important. Now, where does it go? Well, let's take a look. Actually goes in here, and it's, as you can see, it's marked DEF. Does not go in your gas tank, your fuel tank, your diesel tank. It goes in here. So a couple other things to know about DEF is it comes in different forms. I've seen it in sort of half-gallon or 2-liter containers, whatever it is. It typically comes in a big box, and the box has a built-in spout, so you can pull it out, turn this off to remove it, put your spout in, and you can put the box in. How do you know how much to add? There's an indicator on your gauge, and I'll show you that. One of those boxes will last you a long time. So I head down to Florida and back, and you know, I've rarely had to add DEF, but when you do need to add DEF, you need to really pay attention to it. If it shows up as low on your gauge, you need to get some fairly quickly, because if you do not add it, the engine will gradually shut down in a period of time. So it won't run without DEF. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Okay, I'm going to show you on my 2017 Sprinter how to access the DEF level. So on my left, I have a menu button. Yours is probably going to be a little bit different if it is newer. On mine, I'm able to cycle through, and on this screen it shows me the DEF level, which is really just over half on my DEF, and it will cycle back now to that's my actual gas gauge or diesel gauge. But I'm about halfway through on my DEF, so I'll need to keep an eye on that as we head south. So there you go, that's mine. Yours may look a little different. Tip number 4, slides. It's unfortunately a fact of RV life that if you have slides, you're going to have problems sooner or later. So I would suggest learning as much as you can about your slides, learn how to operate them properly. The key tip that I would give you is when you are putting your slides out, you put the slides all the way out, don't stop and start, put it all out in one action. When you get to the end of the cycle, hold the button for a second or two more, and you'll hear the motors cycle down, because that's what's actually happening there. So that's very important. And similarly, when you're retracting the slide and running them back in, you run them all the way back in. So make sure you have everything cleared out of the way, run them all the way back in without interruption. And again, when you get to the end of the run, you hold the button for 1 or 2 seconds, and it will allow the motors to shut down. So that's the most important thing about slides. The other thing that I would tell you is, at some point you probably will need to know where your slide controller is. So and my model has a Schwintek slide, and I would say that most of these Sprinter Class B plus, Class C models will have Schwintek slides. So hard to say. Schwintek slides are manufactured by Lippert Industries. So there is a Lippert app that you can download, and if you run into problems, you can actually chat online with the service tech. It's free, and they'll walk you through it. I was stuck here the day before leaving for Florida one day with the slide out, and they helped me get it back in. I had to find the slide controller first, which in our case, in our 24L, is under our bed. So I was able to find that. And once you find a slide controller, you can manually retract the slide, usually, if that's the problem, or there could be other issues. So it's important to know about that. And it's important to know where your slide controller is. If you don't know where it is, make sure you find out. You can call your manufacturer, and they'll be able to tell you. But Lippert has been helpful to me more than once. Tip number 5, black tanks. Okay, the last tip that I want to talk about is black tank maintenance, the dreaded black tank. And that's something that can make one of your RV trips a little bad. You don't want to have black tank problems. So several things that you want to do to maintain your black tank. You want to use an enzyme-based type of digester that you pour in your black tank. I believe it's called Valterra Power Pro Blue. It's blue in the bottle. It's a liquid, and it does a good job of digesting waste, toilet paper, all that. So I've been using that for a while now. I'm very satisfied with that, but you definitely need to use something each time you go out on a trip. You generally want to keep your black tank, get it fairly full before you empty it. And when you do empty it, you do want to flush it, of course, secondly, with the gray tank. It will flush out your hose. So that's a typical routine on dumping at a dump station or whether you're in a campground. Another thing that I would suggest to you is you don't want to leave your black tank valve open at your campsite. That can create real problems. So that's really important is to use a lot of water throughout the course of your trip. So you want to use a lot of water and keep the black tank fairly liquefied. Along with the product that you're putting in, it helps to break everything down much easier. So I ran into a problem before where I had to change my black tank valve because it wouldn't close properly because the chemical that I was using wasn't working right and we weren't using enough water. So those are the biggest things. There's one other tip that I would give you. I put one of these, and they're so easy to put on. This is a termination valve for the end of your sewer pipe, and as you can see, it has a separate valve on it. So what does that do? Well, when you're at a dump station or wherever you are, when you take that cap off the end of the sewer pipe, you're not going to get splashed. And believe me, it happens. It can happen. So that totally prevents it. You don't open the valve until you're all hooked up and ready to go. So it's definitely something you should consider. Very inexpensive. Put it on yourself. Save yourself some mess. So, okay, so those were 5 tips that I gave you. If you're new to your RV, really any RV, some of them are specific to sprinters, good tips to know. But any one of these can give you a bad day. You don't want that. So keep up with the maintenance on your RV and it will benefit you. But these 5 tips I think will help you get a long way. So if you like what you see, please give me a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. See you next time.